Have you heard about 16 days of activism?
Any form of violence that you experience because of your gender is definitely a form of GBV. We actually talk about the numbers. 150 women lost their lives last year in Kenya to femicide, and the people behind them.
When women decide, there's so much change that happens.
Please join the conversation.
You actually feel ashamed when you're violated.
Let's not be the kind of people who are like, if it's not happening to me, I'm not going to, bother with it.
We went for the femicide march protest last year. How many people showed up?
It's up to us to be the good in society.
Stay tuned, you shall know a lot more about it.
Hi everyone, did you know that in 2024 alone, over 150 women lost their lives to femicide? Welcome to another episode of the Journey and Fields podcast. Today, we kick off the 16 days of activism, and we hope that this episode does get to give you a bit of insight about this campaign. My name is Stella.
And my name is Mwende, and we will be talking about 16 days of activism. If you've heard about it, know about it, that's great. Please share your thoughts in the comment section. But if you've not heard about it, don't worry. We will share a few things for you to be aware. So if you've been asking yourself why 16 days of activism and why it's important, at the very least, at the end of this episode, you will leave with that knowledge. So just to kick us off, 16 days of activism actually started in 1991. Nani alikuwa amezaliwa hapa 1991? I'm even asking the people that we are working with here. Hey,
wow,
okay.
No one, actually.
Allah, honor. Anyway,
well, scratching them. They're not sure.
People are like, we don't tell our ages, but anyway, I definitely was not born in 1991. So kama ulikuwa umenipea uzee, please. Anyway, yeah. So in 1991, at the Center for Women's Global Leadership, that's when the campaign was first officially launched, and it was really just to bring the plight on the issues that women were facing in line with what human rights are. So it's been that many years since 16 days of activism started. Over the years, it continued to be improved upon. In 1999, I believe, this is how you know I went to 844, the cramming. The 16 days of activism was officially adopted by the UN General Assembly, and that's actually when the first day of 16 days of activism was officially designated as an international day. So in 16 days of activism starts on the 25th of November with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and ends on 10th December, which is Human Rights Day. There are different activities that happen in those 16 days. And the idea is that this was a space that was intentionally curated so that we take time to ask ourselves, when it comes to gender-based violence and the violations that women face, are we intentionally reflecting around them? Are we intentionally doing things to make sure that women are not going through these things? Are we intentionally having these discussions and raising awareness on, for example, gender-based violence? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this is not a women-only issue, but we do know that when it comes to any form of injustice, the people that suffer more are women and children. So that was the intention of 16 days of activism. We will share a bit more about the different days, what is commemorated, and just generally why it's important and how we can be intentional with it as we go along. So moving on, Stella, just given the background of what 16 days of activism is, I'm curious to hear from you why you think it's important, especially in our local context as Kenyans. Yeah.
Well, first, because numbers don't lie. The number I just read and the reference, the source is from Femicide Count Kenya, that over 150 women lost their lives last year in Kenya to femicide. And we know that the same site, Femicide Count Kenya, have also recorded that majority of these deaths are actually by intimate partners. And so it's not like strangers, and I'm not justifying that a stranger should end your life, but the fact that it's coming from somebody who's very close to you, who's very dear to you, somebody that you trust with your life, is such a big challenge. The other reason is because I haven't gone anywhere and not heard of any person who has not experienced a form of gender-based violence. In fact, it's on record that 1 in every 3 women, and I think now it's more than that, has experienced a form of gender-based violence. And then we also saw that last year in Kenya again, about 45% of women have experienced GBV. So numbers don't lie. And because of those very high numbers, I mean, the ideal number would be 0. But the fact that you're talking about more than 5% having experienced violence is really sad, and it's very worrying. And if we don't solve this challenge, then we are likely not to solve it for over 100 years. There is a report about the gender gap that says that we are 151 years away from gender equality. And that's so shocking. Like 151, how many people do you know that have lived for 151 years? So it's such a challenge. And to even know that of all the people in this room here today, it's likely that each woman who is here has experienced a form of violence. So we need to stop and ask ourselves, what's going on? What's wrong with us? And yeah, it's not a women's problem only. Men too are part of this. Gender diverse people are also part of this. But really, the reality is that women and girls are most affected when it comes to gender-based violence. Yeah.
And even just hearing those statistics, it's a bit sad because, and now we are sitting here and we are seeing that 16 days of activism started in 1991. We are now in 2025. That's a child that was born, is now an adult, can now vie for presidency in Kenya, can now, there's so many things that child can do. And in 34 years, we are still in a situation where over 150 women, and this is just the data that has been reported, because part of the reason why we keep finding out more and more is people are now starting to report. People are now starting to be aware that, by the way, every time I'm going to the stage and this makanga is trying to touch my ass or is catcalling, that's actually a form of violence. And sometimes people never process such things as such. And that's why the data that is being reported right now is high. The numbers are high. And chances are that with more awareness, they'll get higher. To me, it's such a shocker because we would expect that as we go along, the numbers reduce. And we know those 150, it's just because it has been recorded or it's been reported. Yeah. So then when I think about it, I'm just like to what, how many years will we continue talking about these things without some form of action being taken? How many children, how many women, generally, how many human beings are going to suffer and go through some form of gender-based violence because nothing is happening? And that's why I keep thinking about, when there's all these global conferences, I mean, well, not to quote one, not that it has a problem, but for example, we have Women Deliver, which is also like a huge space to talk about women's rights. We have CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, that happens every year. And that's a space really where people come back and talk about some of these rights issues. And I wonder, how things can move from conversations to action. And there has been action. Even as I say this, the truth of the matter is there's been a lot of action. We have a lot of actors between the state, not-for-profit organizations, activists. We have a lot of actors that are generally making sure that there's less and less violence. However, I feel like it needs to be at a bigger magnitude. This is not something that can be addressed piecemeal. This is something that has to be put in policy, because once the law is there and the law says this, then there's something to hold people accountable to. I think one of the things that people have been talking about is how, for example, the Sexual Offences Act in Kenya, this is like one of the most contentious pieces of law that we have in Kenya. And it is so safeguarded because, for example, when My Dress, My Choice happened in 2014, that's actually when we realized that stripping is not listed as a sexual offense in the Sexual Offences Act. But can you imagine, man or woman, whatever gender you are heading somewhere and for whatever reason, you're attacked because of either how you dress. It might not even be about that. Even to translate what happened at that time to the context of something that happens to men, which I don't agree with. There was an era where conductors used to be stripped because apparently they are not clean, you're not well dressed, and they used to be publicly stripped. And there was a time that used to happen when, I guess, before the regulations happened. Would you believe that that is not an offense in the Sexual Offences Act? Yeah, so just things like that, to me, I kind of feel like a lot more things need to be embedded in the law so that there is something tangible that you can seek action based on. And just looking at the context of Kenya, I mean, there's just so much that continues to happen that we find out day by day that just brings this conversation to light and makes it something very important for us to keep thinking about. A fun fact, because I know when we talk about money, people pay attention. Kenya loses over 40 billion every year to gender-based violence and femicide. Yeah. And this was a proper study that was done and shared earlier in the year. We can put in the link in the, what is it called? The about section, the description, or rather, of this session. Sorry, guys, this is how you know it's just been a long day for us. We've been filming, but yeah, we can put in those statistics in there for you to check out. But as you can see, gender-based violence, it's not just about personal experiences for people, but even as a nation, we are losing a lot of money to it. And part of this is in terms of having to rechannel funds to, like, now, for example, last year when there was maandamano because of femicide, a task force was created. Government allowances for them to sit on those task forces is not kidogo money. Paying, all this and so on and so forth. So when you hear that amount, you might wonder, that sounds like it's exorbitant. However, it goes to a lot of things to either address or support survivors of violence, or for whatever reform processes, for whatever meetings are happening, for the lobbying, for the advocacy, for the amount of money that is stolen in the name of creating services that respond to gender-based violence that some are not seen to fruition. There's just a lot of money that is also being lost out there. So when we talk about 16 days of activism and why it's relevant for us as Kenyans, your taxes are going to address something that could be avoidable.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even death, because when you lose your life, then you're not paying taxes, which government loves. You're also not contributing to household income. And so that too is a form of loss that we experience. To paint a picture of how grave this situation is that yes, we have the laws, yes, we have the different forums that you're talking about, nationally, regionally, internationally, everywhere, really talking about elimination of violence against women. But at the end of the day, practice is what is really important. So we can have all the laws that we have, and we do have many. I actually wrote an article in 2022. It was a letter to the president saying, we are not short of laws, we're actually short of practice, that we don't have the right mechanism to hold people accountable and to say that, you did this, and so because of that, you're not able to access a couple of privileges in the country. We recently saw a video of Pastor Nganga, for instance, saying, it's as if it's just a casual thing that he did, and really it was just him trying to. And the way he was even saying it, it's like it's very comfortable. It's a very usual thing, And just reading comments of people justifying what he's doing, excusing him for what he's doing, is a clear indication of why gender-based violence still exists. It's deeply rooted in our patriarchal norms as a society and as a country. And it's not just Kenya. It's across the globe. In this same country, we've seen a member of parliament being slapped by a colleague. We've seen a governor slap another politician as well. And nothing much happens to them. And really, it's a violation of Article 10 of our Constitution. But they're still in office, they'll finish their term, and everything is gone.
And those are the leaders that are role modeling for kids out here.
Yeah. So, and how many people have you had in your own family? I mean, we know we come from families that we know people who have been violent, and nobody can touch them. If you go to any office of the chief will tell you how many cases of gender-based violence they've recorded. Or even in schools. I mean, I've gone to so many mentorship sessions with kids, and they'll say, actually, there's this case in my family and I can't tell anybody, So cases of violation are everywhere. But the question always is, how come these things are not being resolved? Well, the answer is that we had these cases, authorities had these cases, and they are deeply entrenched patriarchal norms that make us would rather live with shame than expose violators. Yeah, so it's a very sensitive, very hidden, very protected area, and that's why we still have violators living amongst us. I mean, we went for the Femicide march protest last year. How many people showed up? And even after that, it was civil society organizations coming together to push or to drive or mobilize citizens to sign the Femicide petition. Again, we spent months, literally, I think at least 3 months, mobilizing people to give 100,000 signatures to this whole petition. Yeah. And if it was something else, like whatever, anything to campaign for something else and not protection of women and girls, then it would have gone fast. So we have such a long way to go. We're talking about 34 years. In some areas, especially mashinani, it's even further than, yeah. So that's why we need to talk, and that's why we need to keep creating awareness. Yeah. Perhaps we can also go into some of the forms of gender-based violence, because sometimes when we say gender-based violence or victims or survivors of gender-based violence, people think that, you are beaten up, you are battered, you can't see, black eye. And yes, that's a form of gender-based violence. However, there are so many other forms of gender-based violence, including that clip by Pastor Nganga. Yeah. It's a trigger, and the fact that people keep defending it or giving excuses for it is also a form of violence in itself against women and girls. Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, what he said, I think you should just go and find out, because I've seen comments, people saying that he was just expressing himself. And by the way, it's not a problem. This is something that he did in a group with others. I don't even know whether we are allowed to say this word, but it rhymes with the word grape. So basically, they graped someone, and they were punished for it. But the thing is, the way he was telling this story, you can tell your story, because in the grand scheme of things, if you were punished for it, you served your time. However, to proceed after just sharing that, and you start saying, na wewe hata hakuna mtu anaweza kuangalia. What is that? Like, it shows that this person probably, they still have the same, their mindset is still the same. That has not changed. And you can imagine the influence that he has. Like, I feel like that man is loved a lot by Kenyans. Going back to when there was this huge concert that was happening, Rema Fest, and I think there were clips on TikTok of how even the audience is the one that was like, bring him, he needs to sing for us. So that he has that magnitude of influence, and saying such comments, you can imagine how people will just be like, oh, so yeah, it's okay to say such things. Yeah. So, when we're looking at the different forms of violence, it's not just physical. There's a whole emotional aspect to it. There's financial violence. Right now, violence, we're observing it in the digital space. But if you're the kind of people who go online to start telling people, na umevaa aje leo ukai vizuri, you can give feedback. However, don't say, hey, mapua yako inakaa kubwa. It's okay for you to say, hey, I'm not sure that, for example, that makeup is, your shade or something. That is positive criticism. However, though, is it really your business to question someone? Sometimes that's what I don't think people process, that people assume that violence is this whole big thing of like, akona black eye, amegongwa tunaiona, or some other forms of sexual violence. But it's not just about that. It's, making people uncomfortable by making comments about things that they cannot change. If my nose looks like that, what do I do? There's nothing that I can do. You're pretty much violating someone's space. So when we think about all the different forms of violence and how we experience it, I would say, to me, the way that I see violence is infiltrating upon someone's space. So anything that makes someone uncomfortable, whether physically, whether mentally, whether, in different perspectives, it's very important that we be cognizant of that. Let's mind our business. Me, even sometimes, and this is a very radical thing, but people who ask women about children, and you don't know this woman, you're just there like, oh, why don't you have kids? Imagine, in some ways, I also see that as a form of violence. And I would even assume the same if it were men that were being asked that question, like, severally. But men rarely get this question. For us as women, almost from the time you're from the time you reach puberty, your life changes. You stop being a girl. People start seeing you as a potential mother. People start seeing you as something. So, even small things of asking someone such things repetitively, that's actually violence. And especially if it's coming from one person. If Stella, every time I met her, she's like, una watoto, una nini. Like, yeah.
So any form of violence that you experience because of your gender is definitely a form of GBV. Catcalling is gender-based violence. Groping, unwanted touch, unwanted advances, rape, defiling. We have so many forms of gender-based violence. And I think, for instance, if you use public transport, you know that it is likely that you've gone through a form of violence or you will go through it. We did a campaign, SPLGP alumni, and that whole campaign was about gender-just public transport. And so many female commuters and also female drivers were saying that, I can't even drive in peace because my male counterparts are not protecting me. They actually disrespect me. Or even commuters, they're the ones, throwing all sorts of comments. And then I even know women-specific cab service for women drivers, and they only ferry female customers as well because of the same thing. And so there's so many areas that we can cover on gender-based violence. But please find the time to educate yourself. Use in the internet to just find out what are some of the different forms of gender-based violence and what can I do to educate myself more. I think we don't talk enough about financial abuse, and we were talking the other day about the love con revenge. You think you're getting to know somebody, or you're innocently getting to know someone and you're dating, and then boom, And we also know people in marriages, in families that are also being exploited financially. So there is so much to cover in abuse, but we want to remind people in our community that, you know what, it's not, the world is not over because you've been abused or because you've realized that you've been abused. You can actually report, You can take one step ahead and educate yourself and say no to any form of violence. And no means no. A lot of times there's abuse in the workplace, especially when there is the arrangement of power over, you're a senior person at work and you're taking advantage of the people reporting to you. Again, in every institution that has a human resource office or they're even outsourcing, the truth is that you can actually report. But then again, it's a challenge to all employers that, establish mechanisms where people can report or where they can be whistleblowing. But abuse at the workplace is such a big deal. Abuse at family level, again, abuse in public institutions. We've heard of, we work together and the campaign on sex for grades, sex for pads, so people are in very vulnerable situations and that exposes them to abuse, which is completely unacceptable. So please educate yourself on the different forms of violence and gender-based violence. And maybe it can also help to reduce the cases of violence, even from violators, because maybe sometimes they don't even know what they're doing.
Actually, that's what I did want to say. I mean, it's our duty to just know what this is, because once you're informed, at the very least, you can do better. And the truth of the matter is that because we are in communities and you are dealing with human beings day to day, things like, for example, crime will never stop. But then you can never full on eliminate crime in this world, because sometimes a criminal, yes, sometimes there are criminals who do what they're doing because they need to eat, they need to live, they need to do whatever, and that can be tied to the economy. But there are people who are criminals because they're just bad people. So in every society, there are good and bad people, and it's up to us to be the good in society. And what that means is just understand what things look like, acknowledge privilege if you have privilege, look at people as people, and ultimately, bottom line, speak to people and treat people the way you'd want to be treated. If you don't want to be spoken rudely, don't be rude to anyone else. And I mean, it's sometimes these are difficult things because you have to unlearn a lot. However, starting from one small action is what will lead to a lot of change to improve lives for everyone, whether it's women, men, children, anyone else in this life. So unfortunately, we are a true representation of the society, and even you who's watching this and ourselves, we need to ask ourselves the tough questions of what am I doing that could be contributing to someone feeling like they've been violated, or someone saying, you know what, I've actually gone through some form of violence. So yeah, let's just keep thinking about it. Let's continue to call ourselves out, and also let's acknowledge that some of these things exist to create more awareness. So if you see something that you don't know of, it's International Day of the Girl. Imagine it will not even take you 5 minutes to Google and just see, why is this day important? Why is it still happening? Those days exist to remind us of the things that people are going through. So yeah, let's just be cognizant. Let's play our role, and let's show up as good human beings, because that's the only way that we will reduce gender-based violence, and we will increase people being happy in this life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always feel that we can't fully address this issue of gender-based violence if we don't talk about shame, because it's you actually feel ashamed when you're violated, and you're expected to go and report, you're expected to still show up, there's a sort of judgmental eye that you have to deal with from society when you say that, I'm actually a victim or a survivor of gender-based violence. And so that's why I think it's important to inform or educate ourselves and know that we have a role to play. If you haven't been violated, then you need to support somebody who has and who has come out, yeah? Because people actually feel so down, self-esteem. Others die by suicide because they don't know what to do, and others even actually want to commit another crime, yeah? So how many people have we heard that people killed their intimate partners because they were violent, yeah? Others are actually very violent because they also went through gender-based violence. So the shame bit needs to really, really be addressed. And nobody is immune to violence. Nobody, none, yeah? And a friend of mine was doing a campaign, and the campaign was around, how does somebody who's gone through gender-based violence look like, and she has different faces of different people, and it's how me and you look like, Yeah, so we need to be less judgmental, and we need to also extend grace to each other and know that it could happen to any one of us. No one is immune. And so we need to what's the opposite of shame? Like, we need to unshame people who've gone through it, and the whole topic of gender-based violence, yeah. But speaking of violence, there is one movement in Kenya that actually set the pace for how people organize around gender-based violence. And that campaign is My Dress, My Choice, which you happen to have been part of the committee, the planning committee, the planning team. And yeah, first I'd like to celebrate you and everyone else that you worked with. And I know we'll host them someday in the podcast. So to say, well done. Like, that was a new thing in Kenya for sure, that a woman had been stripped and women were saying no. Actually, even men. Like, they were saying, enough is enough. This is not going to happen again. And we're all going to show up on the streets and say, enough is enough. But take us through that. How did you find yourself in the space? Why did you do it? And how was the whole experience?
Yeah, I feel like this would definitely be a whole episode in itself. But My Dress, My Choice was organized by women from all walks of life. Back then, there used to be, Facebook was the thing. You TikTok people, you don't know what Facebook was. Those Facebook groups, my God, there was a lot that used to happen there. But anyway, there was a Facebook group called Kilimani Moms. And someone had just posted a video of a lady that had been stripped in town, the area around Odion Luthuli there. And that post had over 2,000 comments of women being like, surely we just can't let this happen. So people were like, you know what, let's do something about it. People started fronting, let's meet. 14 women showed up, and that's how we ended up being co-organizers of the protest. And I think My Dress, My Choice was really just a show of, this is what, when citizens come together, they can achieve. Because in some ways, when you ask me, was justice achieved? Around that time, there was a lot of these stripping cases. So for a different case, the perpetrators were actually sentenced to death. So they're serving a life sentence, just because there was that whole Matatu incident, where they were even talking about bring a bottle. Anyway, if you've not seen that, you can just go and Google this, because some of these things are a bit too graphic. But it was evidence that when the common mwananchi decides to say no, things can move. Because out of those 14 co-organizers, I think only 1 or 2 were working in the not-for-profit sector, and they did not even show up as people that were day-to-day practitioners or were activists or, were doing advocacy around these things. They showed up because to them it was like, let me just show up. It wasn't, this is my organization doing this, it's me. People showed up. We had people who were calling us and they were like, you need t-shirts. Okay, let me send 5,000. How many t-shirts will that be? It was fully led by citizens. Let me just say that. Of course, we do have organizations that came in to support. And it's a true testament that you cannot act alone. Even at that time, we had some of our political leaders, let me just say, we tried to reach out to them when we were planning this thing and nobody responded. And then on the day of when they realized, oh, this is a big deal, yeah, they showed up and people are like, by the way, no, go away or stay there. Or alternatively, we are here trying to get the audience of the Inspector General. Call him, use your power. So anyway, just to show that when citizens come together and do things, you can achieve so much. One of the biggest achievements was that stripping was included as an offense in the Security Act. At that time, the security bill had just been tabled in Parliament again for discussion, and stripping was included as an offense. And we know before such things happen, probably that stripping would not have even been included as an offense in the Security Act, even as of today, if that protest did not happen. But I think it's just to show that each of us can do our part. You don't have to go to a protest, but you could be in a matatu and you're seeing someone being harassed, and the least that you could do that could make so much impact is to support that person. If you're in a matatu and you're told to songe watu wakae wanne and you're not saying anything, even if you're not the one who's been told to move, you're not helping the situation. So sometimes it's as little as speaking out for others. Let's not be the kind of people who are like, if it's not happening to me, I'm not going to, bother with it. But yeah, that was what my dress, my choice was evidence of. And we were so shocked because I don't think that we thought us going to the streets would lead to this much. But we had to work with other people to sort of even give us tips, because I think as we were like, on Saturday, we're just going to go to the streets. You come with whatever you want to wear. You want to wear a mini skirt, you want to wear a dera, you come to the streets. And then someone told us, if you're protesting on a Saturday, if I'm going for a wedding, do you think I'll stop to join you? So people were like, if you want to be disruptive, do it on a Monday when people are at work, town, put it at a standstill. That's when you will get attention. So all those things we didn't know, we learned through the community. So there's just a lot that citizens can achieve when we stand together. And that's why anytime there's like calls for collective action, whether it's at community level, let's go to the chief, tushtaki huyu, amekuwa akichokoza watoto, please speak out. Let me tell you, your voice could be, that piece that is needed to fill that cup so that then action can happen. So let's just show up for others in the same way that we'd want others to show up, and also support. Come with what you can. If what you can afford at that point is to speak out, share in your social media, do that. If you can support using money, do that. If you can be present, do that. Ultimately, we are trying to create a life where even the people that come after us enjoy their lives. And we just have to all play our parts.
Yeah, I think it was a very successful campaign. And up until now, literally you can wear a short dress, a short skirt, And even those who will attempt to harass you, they'll do it in fear.
True.
Back in 2014, it was in confidence. We are going to harass her, we are going to strip her, and there's nothing they can do. Now, no, it's actually very fearful. Yeah. It's a very fearful space if you dare go that way. So I think it was a very successful campaign. And I think that our girls will grow up knowing that this actually happened and something was done for this space. And they only need to just build up on it. Yeah. When we showed up on the streets last year for the End Femicide protest, I believe that the My Dress, My Choice campaign had laid ground for what happened. Mobilization was easier because, groups do come together. So yeah, well done to you.
Well, thank
you.
And
every lady who was part of organizing
and man
that.
And whoever.
And even men,
we can't take away from the fact that this was women saying that enough is enough. If these women did not start this protest, I doubt that a man would be like, let's do a protest, my dress, my choice, because of whatever. Yeah, and also, it's a true testament that when women decide, there's so much change that happens. When you remember where the journey of Karura, when back then President Moi wanted to put skyscrapers at Uhuru Park, sorry, not Karura, Uhuru Park, Wangare Maathai really lobbied. And who was she working with? Women who threatened to strip. And that is when they threatened to strip, they were listened to, because people were like, hey, sasa hata wanawake wanataka kutoa nguo. That is just one example. There's been a lot of incidences where women have really like stood up and they were like, enough is enough. And let's read up on all of that. The Me Too movement, which was, well, in the global north, that's where it started. Like Femicide last year, when people went to the streets. I mean, the reality is when women speak up, yes, people finally listen.
That's a quotable quote.
But does it have to wait for then?
Yeah, but that's a quotable quote. When women when women decide, anything can happen. They can move. Literally, we can move. We can move things.
But the question, and you know what? The question remains: do they have to protest so that they are not
really
facing these violences? No. So that's the question. Why are we making women have to do this? And why is that the only time when they are listened to?
Right. I like that.
I feel like that's where I would leave this conversation at, and let's all, ruminate and think about that and see, whether it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. So continuing with the solutions, I think it would be good for us to share some of the hotlines that victims, survivors, or even community of friends around people who are going through it and they really do not know where to report. So we want to remind everybody in our community that you can actually report a case of gender-based violence. And we have some toll-free lines that you can contact, and others you have to pay. We have some free service therapists as well, and then others that you have to pay. But bottom line, we believe that having this information really does make all the difference. And one of the hotlines is the National GBV Prevention and Response Helpline. I know this works for sure, because I know friends of mine that have worked there. And if you go online, you can actually see some of this information. And maybe we can even link it on the description box as we put out this episode. The other one is the National Police Helpline or Police Care. And this, by the way, was part of our policy commitments as a country back when President Uhuru was president. And it was part of Kenya's generation equality commitments, and this was actually set up. I know that maybe the challenge could be funding, but it's actually something that is existing, yeah? Then we have child helplines as well. We will definitely attach here. We have the FIDA Kenya toll-free line. Again, if you Google FIDA, or we will also attach the contact, it's there. And we have a couple of NGOs as well. So if you go online and just look at toll-free lines where people can contact them, then definitely you'll find. And we have organizations as well, government agencies, organizations that you can look up online if you have that privilege to access internet. But yeah, we'll definitely link them up. But bottom line, just to say that you're not alone. You can talk to people, you can report cases, and it doesn't have to be you experiencing it. You can actually report somebody that you know is a violator, yeah? And you can also extend a hand by sharing these contact details to somebody who is going through it, yeah.
And if all else fails, just walk to the closest police station. We know that system has its own issues. However, that is the system that is supposed to be there to work for you. So if all else fails, please walk into a police station and just report. Because ultimately, it's to prioritize your safety, your wellness, and your well-being in general.
Yeah, we have so many stories. If you look at what Ian Wafula has done, he just released a short film on the same thing, that even our police men and women have gone through mental health challenges because of the level of cases of gender-based violence. So we also need to start relooking or reimagining how we engage police, because these are also human beings who are challenged by seeing the level of gender-based violence that is out there. So now more than ever, we also need to invest in police departments, especially those ones that are dealing with gender-based violence cases. So we have a long way to go. Things are shaping up, but we just wanted to let everybody know that all is not lost. Your world is not ended yet because you've gone through gender-based violence, and you can actually report. So yeah, on these 16 days of activism, please join the campaign. Please educate yourself online. Please listen to media interviews. They happen on radio, on TV, just educate yourself, and please extend grace to people who've gone through gender-based violence. Yeah.
And I just want to say, apart from educating yourself, evaluate yourself. Don't just listen to that information and leave it there. Evaluate yourself, because we might realize that there's a lot of things that we are socially and culturally wired to that are actually perpetuating a lot of these violences. And some of those things, it's our duty to unlearn. So yeah, don't leave it at just educate yourself. Educate yourself and ask yourself, actually, what have been my thoughts around this? What have been my practices around this? We hope that this episode has been useful and informative. And we generally hope that one way or the other, we can reduce cases of violence by all of us, playing our part, challenging ourselves, and of course with Stella's call to action, educating ourselves, knowing what's right and what's wrong. Let's remember to show up for others. Part of the reason why violence continues to be perpetuated is because the people that are seeing the violence happening are also enabling it by saying nothing. So let's remember that we all play a duty, and let's remember that these things should not be happening. It's not the norm, even if it has been the norm. So thank you so much for hanging out with us for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.